Trade price, trade off. What gives when someone else is cheaper? Because something always gives. Now, there's always tension around price, isn't there? Always. You need to charge enough, cover your business costs and the risks and make a profit, or why would you do it? But there's always downward pressure on your price from everywhere else, from a few places. From the narrative that's kind of out there that trades and building businesses will always try and overcharge people or businesses, and that people should work hard to police this. And it's everywhere, isn't it? In high pages, in the news, it's everywhere. Unlike for shops and banks or lawyers or doctors or accountants, no one says, you need to watch them, do they? It's particularly focused on trade. So it comes from the narrative. It also comes this downward pressure from your customers. They may or may not be influenced by the narrative, but they certainly want to get the good thing at a cheaper price. Of course they do. And then from your competitors, who might well be offering to do work at different prices than what you're charging. Now, very carefully, didn't say the same work just then. I'll come back to that point in a moment. So when you think about your competition, any given situation, you tend to imagine it's a comparable business and a comparable job that they're going to do, don't you? Particularly if a customer or a potential customer is getting 2 or more quotes and they're telling you another one is cheaper, you and your customer are probably going to default to the assumption that it's kind of the same job and that something's wrong price-wise. The reality is different, isn't it? The two offerings are not necessarily the same. Now, here's the thing. You're a trade business. If they were the same, you're a trade business and your costs are real, right? Or hard. Materials cost what they cost. You're building the same thing. You're likely spending pretty much the same on the materials. It's highly unlikely that your competitor has found some secret deal somewhere. Possible, of course, but not likely. And labour costs what it costs too. There are laws, after all, in this country, in most of the countries in the Western world. There's some movement here, but not lots. Good people cost more than less good people, etc. So if an alternative to what you're proposing is coming in significantly cheaper than you, something gives. If you've all got the same costs, more or less, and you're building the same thing, how are they cheaper? Something gives. It's worth examining what that could be. So you can help your customers understand what could be the difference and investigate, and then make an informed choice rather than a kind of uninformed non-choice, which is what they'll do if you don't help them understand. I was talking to Matt about this the other day. He's a residential builder. He's been told a few times lately that he's expensive and he's frustrated, not surprisingly. He's not greedy. He's charging a 24% gross margin and his charge out rate for carpentry is $78 an hour. So he's not being particularly outrageously expensive. 3 or 4 people lately have told him he's expensive. He doesn't really know why. He doesn't know whether they're reacting to prices having gone up for building 50% in the last 2 or 3 years and that it's just more expensive than they were kind of expecting. He doesn't know if they've got someone else quoting and his quote is expensive by comparison, and he doesn't know if any comparisons they are making are proper kind of apples to apples comparisons either. Now he's going to go and ask, because here's the rub, if it's lots more expensive, something's going on. Now he's going to go and find out, and if I get an update, perhaps I'll do another video and let you know. I want to talk about what may be going on, because like I said, it's up to you to explain to your customer what it could be so that they understand when they're comparing quotes, they understand what's going on and can make an informed choice, like I said, so that they can choose between your more expensive but better quote or a less expensive but perhaps shittier quote from somebody else. So let's look at what could be going on. I've got 3 things for us to consider. Number 1, maybe you're charging too much. We do have to consider this, don't we? Of course we do. Right, you could be. It's possible, and you should satisfy yourself that you're not. That's what you should do first, isn't it? Sanity check yourself. What margins are you charging? 24% for Matt, for a builder, is not greedy. What's your labour rate? If you're not being greedy here, then the effect of a few percent is very small. The effect of knocking some off your labour rate is quite small. Are your subcontractors charging too much? If you have them, you're bad at estimating. Maybe you've got no idea and you're estimating shit and you're all over the place. All these could be true, couldn't they? It's possible, I suppose, that you're doing all of them. Your margin's too fat, your labour rate's too high, your subcontractors are taking the piss, and your allowances are too big. Not very likely though, is it? Let's be honest. What you need to do is sanity check your rates and your margins with your peers, or by talking to me, and I'll tell you what other people are charging. You know what Matt charges as a builder. Check in with your subcontractors on their labour rates and their margins and how they do their estimating. Go back through some old jobs and calculate the profitability on those jobs, the gross margins on those jobs. If you're not making stupid money on your jobs, probably not an overcharging thing, is it? Now, Matt and I did a quick calculation. You might like this. If he knocks $10 an hour off his $78 an hour carpentry labour rate, that will knock maybe 2 or 3% off the total cost of the job. And they said it was a lot more than that. So we don't think it's his rates and his margins. That's one thing. You can sanity check yourself to see if you're charging too much. Another option 2, the competitor they're comparing you to is somehow cutting corners. This is a very real possibility, isn't it? They could be. Maybe they found a magic source of cheap labour. Maybe they bring in backpackers or immigrants and pay them cash, or very little, maybe. Maybe they don't do safety properly and they cut corners and save money that way. Is this something your customer wants to be part of? Maybe they'll use inferior components or materials. Is that what your customer wants? Can they check? Maybe they rush to work and don't take the time like you do, or or rush their subcontractors. And this surely affects the quality. Another client of mine lost a job, big one, to a cheaper competitor, but he was doing some other work on the same site later, and they uncovered shitty, inferior components and shoddy work that was hidden inside the wall, the electrician. So that client now knows what to expect from the other contract. You can get away with it sometimes, you usually can't get away with it forever, or those bad guys can't. So the third option, you could be charging too much, that seems unlikely. Somebody could be cutting corners, that has consequences. Well, number three, the competitor is playing games with the scope. This is a thing, isn't it? People will deliberately play with the scope and quote a kind of a reduced scope and exclude things. A reduced scope that doesn't include all the things you might be including because you're a good guy. And then they raise variations along the way. So the original quote looks cheaper, but the end price ends up being much higher than that, and perhaps comparable or even more than the one you originally put forward that included everything. The original quote looks cheaper. People can exclude stuff in their small print, or quote for lower quality components than specified, or make very small allowances for provisional sums and things like that. So the scope is very important. It's a shitty thing to do, I think, but it's quite common. Matt said he prides himself on his full scopes, which means the cost doesn't creep up much unless people are adding in more stuff. What do you do? What's your position in that? Matt clearly needs to make this clear to his customers so that they understand why he's expensive, perhaps. So there are three things that could be going on. Your customer isn't likely to clock them. But it's up to you to help them understand that these things could be happening and help them check, or help them understand how to go and check, help them at least understand the possible reasons someone else could be cheaper or might be cheaper, and how to compare your quotes to the alternative, right? How to make sure they're comparing apples to apples. And this should be part of your sales process. You should be building a sales process, you should be building your sales skills, and you should be investing more of your time into sales. The bigger the jobs you're quoting, the more effort you should be putting into sales, not just quoting an estimate. This is how you're going to counter those comments, how you're going to build relationships and trust with your customers, and how you're going to win more of the jobs you quote at those higher margins that you need. Do you want to get better at sales and win more jobs rather than being told you're too expensive when you submit your quotes? Of course you do. Maybe you should look into my coaching. Book a call. That's how that works. See ya.